What's up, everybody? Welcome to a special event that SVS and one of our value partners, ListenUp, who's based in the Colorado area, are putting on today. Just as a note, this is not the official SVS audiophile happy hour. I know we do broadcast Thursdays at 6 p.m. I know we're doing a live stream, but this is a special event that we're partnering with Scott Janoff, who is the senior sales consultant over at ListenUp and a legend in the Colorado audiophile community. We're talking all about subwoofers and bass. Scott, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Nick, man. How about you and Larry?
Oh, man, we couldn't be happier. And of course, as you mentioned, my partner in crime who does join me on the audiophile happy hours, Larry Magoo, our national training manager, is here as well to geek out on bass. Larry, what's up?
Oh, not much, man. It's exciting. I haven't seen Scott in person in like almost 3 years, so it's
been too long, man.
Cool we're getting to hang out because we love their shops in Colorado and Albuquerque.
Yes, that's right. I forgot to mention New Mexico, but we've done some live events there, which were absolutely epic. We had a lot of fun, and looking forward to getting back out there. Hopefully, sometime this year, if not early next year. But before we dive into sort of the agenda for tonight, a couple housekeeping notes. We are giving away an SVS 3000 micro subwoofer with one of our SoundPath RCA audio cables. Basically, if you've left a comment or you ask a question on the comment section here during the live stream, we'll draw your name at random and announce it at the end of the broadcast, and then we'll ship it out to you. So just be present when we make that announcement, and you might end up with your own SVS 3000 micro subwoofer. And again, before we dive into sort of the agenda for tonight, Scott, I wanted you to give maybe a little bit of background just on ListenUp, how long you guys have been around. I think there was an anniversary recently. And then also just basically the kinds of services and products you offer in your stores.
Yeah, this year's our 50th anniversary. So we came into being in October 1972. Steve, Walt, and Mary Kay are our owners, and they started, what's been an awesome ride for me. I've been with the company for almost 32 years, and we have retail stores in Denver. We have retail stores in Boulder, Colorado Springs, Albuquerque. We have online store, great installation staff, custom design services, pretty much if anything to do with HiFi, TV, subwoofers, or electronics, we're here to help.
Yeah, so I wanted to emphasize that it's not just about speakers and surround sound and home theater. You guys cover all sorts of technology out of your 4 stores. Is that right?
We do, yeah. Custom install, smart home stuff. Everything's so network dependent nowadays. So custom networks for the home. And turntables and tape decks and all the cool old stuff too.
Yeah. So if you want to get a phenomenal demonstration of SVS or pretty much any high performance audio product, chances are ListenUp is going to have it there. And can they call you and sort of request different things to demo? Like if people really want to hear a specific product, maybe an SVS subwoofer.
We have a lot of SVS on the floor. Yeah. I mean, always call, let us know what you're interested in. Amongst the stores, we can usually pull something in, if it's on display somewhere else. Put together a system, set up a demo time, and have some fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, they have really cool showrooms. If you've never had a chance to get in there, very detailed, all the cool technology. We've done events, I think, in all 4 showrooms and cram the house in there. It's a lot of fun.
Music matters. We have the whole store outfitted, and all the stores are unique in that regard.
All right. Well, I think we've got some housekeeping done. And if you haven't checked out ListenUp and you are in the Colorado or Albuquerque area, please check one of their stores out. You will not be sorry. It's an awesome experience to see some of the greatest audio products in the world in person. So check that out. But to the topic of the day, and that would be subwoofers. And, I think we'll start off, Larry, I'll kick it to you first, and just give a very sort of high-level 101 description of what a subwoofer is.
Well, 101 would be just a box that makes bass. But if you want to elaborate a little further, if you really look at what makes a subwoofer important, it's what produces the low frequency, whether you're listening to music, movies, television, a video game, anything along those lines. And it brings in that energy that speakers aren't capable of delivering. And it'll be an amplified device in almost every case. Sometimes there's some that are not, but it'll be an amplified system that'll have a woofer, which plays frequencies typically, 80 hertz and below, or really those deep low frequency notes, the 20, 30 hertz bass. So it's the stuff that you feel, the energy, the explosions, the quick bass notes from a guitar in a song or an explosion in a movie. And what it does just adds energy to your room so that you have a more immersive experience all the way around. Whether it could be in a car, it could be in your home, but really it is the impact that you're going to feel from your system.
So, Scott, I imagine you've had a lot of experience walking people through choosing the best subwoofer for themselves. And before we get into some of those tips, we're looking at basically the anatomy of a subwoofer, and it's made up of a few different components. There's the amplifier, the driver, the motor, the cabinet. All of these sort of interact together in all sorts of different shapes and sizes as far as subwoofers go. So, what can you tell us, sort of as a primer, when people are sort of making that first, foray into researching subwoofers? What are some tips and advice you can give them that might lead them down the right path?
I always try to find out, what the purpose is. If it's home theater, there tends to be more of a need for greater output. They're looking for the concussive effects of a motion picture soundtrack. If it's music, you tend to want more speed at lower crossover points. Room size is always critical. What kind of space is available? Can we put a pair of Ultra SB16s in the room, or does it need to be one micro, 3000? That's always a good place to start.
And as far as, when you're sort of trying to connect people to the content, what is the importance of bass when it comes to movies and music and other content?
Well, movies, it's a big part of the motion picture soundtrack. It's the 0.1 channel. So the low frequency effects information, it's a big part of movies. Star Wars without the crazy stuff going in the bottom end. Jurassic Park. It's critical. With music, subwoofers can pressurize a room and allow speakers to be more three-dimensional. So even though it's not bass that you're listening to, the presence of that woofer can make like a saxophone sound more three-dimensional.
I think those are all great comments. And, I think another thing that people underrate with subwoofers, and maybe this comes from the car audio space, but they sort of think it's all about volume and, shaking the room and sort of this massive effect that completely takes your house down. And it's not. I think some of the most impressive things that a subwoofer does is when it's subtle, when it maybe isn't like hitting you in the face, but it's like this subtle undertone, this like sort of ominous foreboding, this ability to sort of create emotion and energy that really drives what you're watching on screen or what you're listening to forward in a way that you would just never even knew existed. And I think a great example is Dune. I think probably everyone's seen Dune, but there's some scenes within that movie where like you wouldn't know what's happening unless you had the proper low frequency extension of the subwoofer. It's like, well, what am I supposed to be experiencing here? So, there's other opportunities like that. And Larry, I know you have a subwoofer demo list that's several pages long. Any insights you can offer there as far as demos that might be impressive for people?
Well, I think that you mentioned the subtlety of stuff too, but also without a subwoofer, how deflating some of those experiences can be. Dune, a lot of it is the music and the hovering engines of the aircraft that are used in the movie. I finally got to watch Ghostbusters Afterlife, and the opening sequence, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but man, the opening sequence is all about this rumble and shaking that's going on. And if you don't have a subwoofer, you're literally not experiencing any of that. And it can completely change the way you're immersed, whether in a music experience or a theatrical experience. And just like a center channel speaker, it makes all the difference in the world.
I think it's so important for people to understand. Just it's one of those things where once you've lived with it, it's kind of like, oh, I could never live without having this sort of impact and depth in my audio experiences. So nothing else than a subwoofer. A lot of people say it's the most impactful upgrade you can make as far as sound goes to a home theater system or even a hi-fi system, because it just adds so much energy and excitement. So I'm going to put Scott on this hot seat here a little bit, because there are 5 things that SVS claims make a subwoofer sound great. And if a subwoofer can do these 5 things well, whether it's an SVS or not, if it does these things well, it's going to be a great subwoofer. So I'm only going to ask you for one of them, Scott, and then we'll sort of talk about that, and then maybe we'll have to give you some help for the others. But what is one of the 5 things that makes a subwoofer sound great?
The big one for me is absolutely accuracy. Speed and accuracy.
That's a big one.
And basically, what does that mean?
You don't want a subwoofer in your home to sound like a car stereo, or maybe some people would, but there's a detachment oftentimes with subwoofers and car stereos where they're doing one thing and the music's doing something else. In your home, you want it to be totally cohesive, whether it's movies or music.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that gets back to the frequency response. Like, is it giving you the sort of one note boomy bloated bass, or is it the exact right tonal frequency at the exact level that you want? So when you're talking about accuracy, it's like not only is it tonally accurate and it sounds like an explosion or a door slamming or a cello string, but it's in just the right proportion to the rest of the soundstage. Larry, I know you know these well, so why don't you give me a second aspect of what makes a subwoofer sound great?
Well, subwoofers do bass, and if you have a subwoofer that doesn't go low, it's just a mid-range bass subwoofer, you're not really getting it. So you want a subwoofer that can absolutely play those lowest notes that you expect, whether it's music or movies, can be digital or whatever soundtracks. So if you have a subwoofer that can hit that 20 hertz note and play really, really low, you're going to have a pretty phenomenal experience.
And when you're talking 20 hertz, that is basically the threshold where you stop hearing the bass and what?
And that is when you feel it. So
that's right.
It's whether you're watching Dune like we were just talking about, or going to the movies and seeing like the Batman or Spider-Man Far From Home or any of those things. It really changes the experience. I keep saying that, but it really does. I think the subwoofer can totally, and I see a lot of people commenting about it here, it blends in with the experience really well, and it should not take over a room. It totally can, but it should be about immersing and making everything else sound better.
Yeah, and some of the ways I like to hear that sort of ultra low extension is like it feels like the room is breathing, or it's guttural or visceral, or sort of these terms that connote feeling and not just sound that you're hearing. So Scott, what do you think? Can you pull another one out of your hat? Another sound quality trait for subwoofers?
Output. I think output we've talked about too.
Output. So basically, what does that mean?
Volume. There are applications where you want it to get up and boogie. You want that rocket ship to feel as if it's in the middle of your room and we're going to the moon.
It's got to play as loud as you can possibly want it to play, and without distorting, I think, and gets to sort of the accuracy comment as well there, because if it's playing loud, but it's sort of breaking up or it's bottoming out, then I think it's not, enough subwoofer for your taste, and maybe it's time to go for an upgrade there. So we have extreme low frequency extension, we have accuracy, we have output. Larry, what else do we have?
Well, we've got the accuracy kind of goes hand in hand with speed and control. So being able to start and stop when you are intended to by the director or musician. Don't add something that shouldn't be there. You've all heard that. We keep bringing up car audio, but the guy that's driving down the street and just sounds like his car is farting. Excuse the language there, but you don't want that.
That's not a swear.
Rattles and all that. So, but that's what it's doing, and you want it to play low, like we talked about, be able to play loud, have this accuracy that Scott was talking about, and have the ability to start and stop on a dime. And when you do all that, you make a pretty phenomenal subwoofer.
Yeah, another term for that is either transient speed or transient response. I mean, you said it best. It's ability to stop and start on a dime. And one of my favorite demos, which I always talk about for this, is the movie Baby Driver, and that opening car chase scene where they're shifting gears and there's shotgun blast and there's all sorts of these just jarring low frequency notes that they have to hit cleanly and they have to stop cleanly, because if you get sort of an overhang to that note, it just sort of muddies everything up and it doesn't sound exactly like a car door slamming or a shotgun blast. And I think, that's a great example. It was actually nominated for, I think, a Best Sound Award too, Baby Driver. So great one to check out there. And then there's a lot of music, I'm sure Scott, where transient response is absolutely critical to creating a sound experience that's actually, truthful to what the artist wanted it to be. I don't know if you have any offhand. That was sort of a cue to you. Any great albums where the bass is sort of really snappy that you can recommend that really demonstrates it?
We here in the store use a tune from a DJ named Ghost Rider. It's called Make Us Stronger. If you want to have a purpose for a subwoofer, put that song on and turn it up to 10 or 11, and you'll be grateful that you've got something there that can handle the low end.
Love it. Another one that I've heard is Bella Fleck and the Fleck Tones. I think it's Flight of the Hippo. Is that the one? Yeah, that's a great Yeah, Cosmic Hippo. That's right. A great example of a track that really shows off transient response, but also low frequency extension. All right, so I think people have enough knowledge now of what they should be listening for when choosing a subwoofer. Now I think we should talk a little bit about the different kinds of subwoofers that are available here. So I'm going to pop something on screen. And I think sort of the biggest decision you have to make ultimately, especially with SVS, is whether you want to go with ported or sealed. And we have sort of the extreme versions of both as far as SVS goes here. But Larry, why don't you kick us off with a little intro on some of the key differences between the two as far as when you're making this decision?
Well, so we do 3 types of subs as a brand. We do our sealed subwoofer like you're seeing there on the right, and then our ported subwoofer that you see there on the left. And then we have one that's similar called the cylinder. And they all are very, if they're in the same series, so we have 6 series of subwoofers from our 1000 series up to our 16 Ultra. And if they're in the same family, they're going to share the same characteristics. But where a sealed subwoofer comes in, this is very extreme, a sealed subwoofer will be smaller. And one of the things we love to say about sealed subs is they do everything well and nothing poorly. They're great for music, great for movies. They're a little bit easier to place in a room. You can crank them, you can keep them at low volumes. But, we'll tend to, if you go into a larger space, have to go with a larger subwoofer or go duals. And so that's where some perks of the ported subwoofers come in. In the SVS space, if you go from a sealed subwoofer to a ported subwoofer in the same family, it grows by 60%. So you might end up with a subwoofer in some cases that can be almost 3 feet deep in the case of the PB16 Ultra there. So you have to take that into account. But what you gain when you go from our sealed subwoofers to the ported is you're getting more cabinet volume. So you've got immediately more output. So at the same volume level, our sealed sub and our ported sub, the ported sub would literally be twice as loud if they're set the same way, but it also goes deeper. So we'll play a little bit lower on the output as far as frequency. So where that benefits you, it will take on a larger space much easier because it's got more breathing room in the area. And at lower volumes, it may be a little bit more present. But a real big perk of our ported subwoofers is that every single one of them in the lineup now, you can actually turn into a sealed subwoofer. And I think we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get into our app-based control. So if you're looking for kind of the best of both worlds, our ported subwoofers really offer that because you can have that big thundering IMAX experiential bass when you're watching your movies, and then you can plug up the ported sub to have it operate like a sealed one whenever you want that quicker, more responsive bass that you're typically used to with a sealed subwoofer.
And I did see a comment fly by about, if you're going to run multiple subwoofers, is it okay to mix ported and sealed? And we generally do not recommend that. It can cause phase issues where basically the time alignment between them is not the same. One may be a little bit fractionally quicker, usually it's sealed, and that can just, imbalance the soundstage. So not recommended, but again, if you have to do it, we'll, I'm sure the folks at ListenUp can provide you some tips on how to get it dialed in. But before we move on from this topic, Scott, I did want to throw it to you and ask, do you have a preference between ported and sealed, and any sort of tips for people to maybe decide between the two if they really are on the fence?
Yeah, again, if it's movies, the emphasis always tends to be with output, so if you have the space because a ported sub is definitely bigger than a sealed sub. If you're doing a single sub in a room, I've got some space for it, I want some output, a ported sub, probably your best bet. If it's from music and wanting speed and accuracy and that crisp tightness, I would typically recommend a sealed sub. But as we've discussed, the SVS app gives you some freedoms of taking a ported sub if you want and giving it the sound of the profile of a sealed sub, and that's pretty cool.
And you have a wide range of speakers at ListenUp too, and I think you have some electrostatic models as well, which tend to be super quick. So I would imagine, depending on the speakers you have, there might be a recommendation between sealed and ported as well that you would make in terms of getting the best blending of sound, depending on, like you said, the room and certain other things, the space you have, but also the speakers you own. Some might lend themselves better to a sealed versus a ported, factoring in your listening preferences.
Speakers in room are a big part of selecting the proper sub. You want that synergy, so you want all 3 of those components to mesh together.
Absolutely. And we did start talking about this a little bit just a minute ago when we had that question, but there's benefits to running more than one subwoofers other than giving SVS more of your money. Sorry, it was a bad joke. But there actually are real acoustic benefits within your room. And I think sometimes people are surprised by what the biggest benefit of running duals is. And Larry, maybe I'll throw it to you for this one to share a little bit of insight on why duals or even multiple subwoofers beyond duals is makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think what you'll notice if you put one subwoofer in a room, you do have a sweet spot. And in that sweet spot, one person or whoever's in that particular like love seat or whatever is going to feel more of the bass from that subwoofer than maybe someone else sitting on the opposite side of the room. So we tend to recommend duals for a couple different purposes. Larger rooms, more headroom in a space. You can go crazy like Youthman did here and do, what was that, 4/16s, I think, in that space. And what it does is it just eliminates a sweet spot. It gives you more headroom. It's more balanced throughout the room. They're more difficult to locate, which is actually a really good thing. You don't want to be able to, oh yeah, the subwoofer's right there all the time when you're watching something. And what it can do is it can bring the entire room to life as well. And you don't have to go bigger. One of the big perks of doing double or dual subs or multiples is you can do smaller subwoofers. So like the micro, we have so many people doing 2 or 4 of those right now because you can just pop them in the corners, or like this instance here with those 16 ultras with the ultra towers, putting them in there to balance out, that's a lot of power in that room. But putting them in there and placement, we'll kind of go into that here in just a second too, but multiples is really more headroom. There's no more of a sweet spot. You get a much better experience just really all the way around. And if you can do multiples, have at it, because it really changes everything. And I saw Khalif. What's up, dude?
There you go. Shout out Khalif. So Scott, if you're on the fence about one bigger subwoofer or maybe 2 more compact subwoofers, or maybe budget, I can only afford this massive one or these 2 other ones. Do you have a recommendation as far as that goes? Or is there other variables people should consider?
I think again, it depends on, room size, what the room's capable of. I generally find 2 subs give you more bass through a larger area than a singular sub does. And sometimes the cost can be the same, as if I'm doing a ultra 16 compared to, a 4000 Pro or something, I think the budget part we can address, but 2 subs for stereo or for movies, that's always been a good combination for me.
Yeah, and we're going to get into placement here in a minute. But I think this is probably the least important reason why, but there's some people who just like visual symmetry. And so they'll buy, they'll get 2 subwoofers for that reason. It's like, well, I don't want it to be by itself on this side of the room. But I think you'll find that, that's sort of let's be honest, audiophiles can be very particular. And, I think visual symmetry is important to some people, but also when it comes to placement, having a single subwoofer, or having a subwoofer in general, you can't always put it in the perfect place in your room. And so when you have duals, you can sort of compensate for the fact that I can't put this single subwoofer in the perfect place in the room, but I have enough space to put these 2 subwoofers exactly here. And that's going to sort of make up for the fact that they're not in the ideal position, because you get more density with the bass waves within the room, and basically everything else that you said, Larry, about, a broader sweet spot and just a better overall listening experiences in more parts of the room. So, I think going dual is much more forgiving. And if you do have the visual preference, of course, that it helps with the symmetry as well. But that's actually, do you have a thought, Larry?
I was just going to say, if you look at a lot of people will look at going with a much larger subwoofer, like this one here, a single PB16, that's a pretty hefty investment in some instances, but it may not be the best solution for your particular room. And I think that's something that the guys that ListenUp and even our customer service team will tell you. We're never going to oversell you on a subwoofer, whether you're talking to them or us. What we'll talk about is your room and figuring out, 2, maybe 3000 series would be better here than a larger ported 16. Mm-hmm. And that's something that once you kind of go through that discovery process, will open up your room and make the experience better too.
Yeah, and if you have a huge listening area, then it could be something like, 4 SB1000 Pros or 4 Micros. You have space in the corners of the room or under furniture or inside furniture. Those are very compact subwoofers that can be hidden away. And, that's an easier thing to hide 4 very small subwoofers than to try to do anything with the PB16, which is, essentially the size of a big doghouse. So you want to make sure that, when you're planning this, there's all your lifestyle factors are accounted for. And, I think when it comes down to choosing how many subwoofers, these are all factors to consider for sure. But we did mention placement, and there's a couple tips that I think would be helpful to people as far as the ways to go about choosing placement. So I'll throw this one to you first, Scott. What do you do when you're helping somebody try to find the best place in their room for the subwoofer, if in fact they have everything on the table, there's no restrictions whatsoever? Like, what sort of tips would you give them to acoustically find the best place?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion on that. That we've placed subs in the listening position and then walked around the room to find where the best resonant location was based on that. Corner loading a sub can usually increase output. So that's sometimes a good place to put it. You just don't want to pull a sub out of the box, pop it in a spot, and leave it alone. Even moving a sub forward or backward an inch or 2 can have a big effect on how it relates to your main speakers, and having them kind of both be in sync.
So I think you sort of alluded to what's called the subwoofer crawl technique, and Larry, maybe you can get a little bit into that and further the understanding around choosing placement, since it is such a critical part of getting the best performance.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and Scott hit it right on the head, and it's something that we've actually done in their store. One of the things I like to do in training is showcase that. So the subwoofer crawl is to help you find the spot in your room where the subwoofer is going to be the most impactful based on your listening position. So like you said, if you can physically pick up the subwoofer and either put it in your chair or directly in front of the listening position, and then you put on a piece of music or just a bass tone generator or something, and you're supposed to crawl, but when you start getting up in age, you don't crawl anymore. So you kind of walk around the room.
Well, let's just stop right there. That's because the subwoofer is usually on the floor. You're not elevating it, so that gets you as close to where the subwoofer will be creating output. Just to clarify that point of why they say you should crawl. But I'm with you, Larry. I think we're all...
Put your kids on the ground, have them walk around, be like, oh yeah, this is...
Where does it sound the best? Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're looking for, and I love doing this in trainings, and we've done it in the ListenUp stores, is you walk around the room and you find the point where the bass and the subwoofer essentially impact you the most, where you're feeling that pressurization in your chest, like when you land in a plane and you feel it in your ears, and you got it pretty loud at that point. But once you find that spot, you might get to a corner and be like, oh man, that's pretty awesome. And then you move over to the other side and you're just floored. That's where the subwoofer should go, so you get an experience like that when you're sitting down. And if you're doing 2, you just repeat the process with the second one. And that will mean that whenever you are sitting down in that listening position, the experience and the output and the low frequency will be the absolute best, because you put it in the spot in the room that impacted the most from your seat.
So I saw a couple comments about people asking for the giveaway. They think they joined a little bit late. Basically, if you asked about the giveaway, you're eligible for the giveaway. All you have to do is leave a comment, ask a question. We're going to draw a name at random at the very end of the live stream. I'll announce it live on air, and we'll direct ship you the SVS 3000 micro subwoofer and a SoundPath RCA audio interconnect, so you can connect that bad boy up to your system. So if you've left a comment, if you've asked a question, you are already eligible. It's only 1 entry per person. So if you ask a million questions, you still only get 1 entry. But we will announce the winner live on air, and then we'll reach out, get your shipping information, and take care of getting that out to you. So that's how we're doing the giveaway tonight. All right, so we talked a little about placement, about duals, about ported versus sealed. I wanted to get a little bit into actually setting the subwoofer up. You've got it where you want it. You've got it connected within your system, but it's not all things equal when you're talking about a 2-channel system, a stereo, versus a home theater surround sound system. So Scott, maybe walk us through a little bit of what you should know, first of all, with 2-channel and how that might be different than a multi-channel surround system.
The more I've done multiple subs and 2-channel systems, that's really kind of become my default for doing subwoofers and 2-channel systems. I like to do stereo pairs. An integrated amplifier would need then left-right preamp outs. You take the left out to the left sub, go into the LFE input, so it does the summing there. Right channel out to the right sub, make sure they're matched subs, spend some time positioning them. I generally cross them over low, 48 hertz or lower, not 80 hertz. I think it gets too boomy at 80 hertz. And then in home theater, oftentimes you're dealing with with EQ, Odyssey or Dirac, EQs that they seem to get weird when you're setting up a sub. So don't take what they tell you to heart. Listen to it, let them do the setup, and then tweak it after the fact to your own liking.
I'm glad you brought up how AV receivers can get weird because they're all different. They don't all act the same. And Larry, I know you've got favorites, and I don't want you to name any of them. They're all great brands, but it's important to understand the nuance that goes into basically calibrating your subwoofer through an AV receiver, given all the different models. So, Larry, what are some tips and advice you can give to folks, regardless of brand?
There's a lot that goes into it, and it kind of goes back to placement where you put it in your room too, because when you put the subwoofer in its spot and you find that location after you're doing the crawl and everything, then you've got to set it up to make it sound its best. And that's where, like what Scott said, with running Odyssey or MCACC or YPA, all the different brands have all these different calibration settings. And if you've never done that, there's a microphone, you sit down, and the speakers on the subwoofer will put out tones. And one of the biggest mistakes that we encounter whenever we're having people contact us via customer service is whenever they're calibrating their subwoofer, the subwoofer is too loud. And so if you have your subwoofer cranked at, say, half volume or 3/4 volume when you're doing your calibration, your receiver is going to be like, hey, that is too loud. So I'm going to pull that back and just reduce the output to it. And you don't really want that to occur. You want to be able to have more flexibility on the subwoofer. So first thing I'll tell you is turn the volume down on your subwoofer before you do your room calibration. And then kind of going back to the music bass versus movie bass, if you're doing integrated amplifiers, you are going to use the crossover inside the subwoofer, just like Scott said. So depending on the speaker, that crossover will change. If you're using large speakers, you're going to have that crossover down lower in the 40, 50 hertz range like you talked about. There'll be other brands. If you're using a bookshelf speaker, you might be up in the 60, 70 hertz range. And you're going to do that inside the subwoofer, not inside the amplifier. And that's where home theater bass differs, is if you're using a receiver, you're not touching the crossover inside a subwoofer. You're letting the receiver do that for you through that low frequency effects channel. So, it sounds confusing, but we have a cool tool on our site. It's the matching tool. You just go in there, go to svsound.com and go under subwoofers. You'll see our matching tool. And if you put in your brand of your front channel speakers, it will show you the difference in bass for a 2-channel experience and a multi-channel experience. And so on a home theater system, you'll let the receiver set the crossover, and typically a home theater subwoofer is crossed about 120 hertz. And then what that does is it just takes all the low frequency bass to the sub, and the other speakers do everything else. So what you're going to do is once you've gotten in place now, you've picked your multiples, and you've run your calibration, now's when you get in there and fine tune. And this seems to be a really long answer, but there's like 10 answers inside there. That's where our app comes into play, and getting in there and adjusting it to where you can adjust the volume, the phase, which we'll geek out on here in a second too, and setting up multiples.
Oh, look at that.
Oh yeah, look at that. I would pull up my phone, but I'm getting text messages.
No, this is better. And I have to say, we have a team member who's working behind the scenes, Eli. He's helping get some of the questions for our Q&A later, and that's his hand. So there you go. There's Eli's hand. You can't hear him, you can't see him. Model. Yeah, but that's his hand. So congratulations, Eli. Hopefully you got a laugh there. But we're talking about calibration. So I think this is we could do a whole hour just on, the nuance of adjusting, crossover frequencies and things like that. But, Scott, I think when you get that 2-channel system and you're sort of dialing it in, what is like the first thing you tell people to do after they've hooked it up in a 2-channel stereo system, as far as like figuring out where that crossover should be? Like, is it you look at the rated low frequency extension of the speaker? Like, what factors into choosing that actual point where it crosses over?
Most speakers are, especially in a 2-channel system, you're not crossing over your main speaker. So, even a bookshelf speaker can you know, a decent bookshelf speaker can play down to 40 hertz before it starts to roll off. So I would generally set my subwoofer volume to a point, lower the crossover. You may have to turn the bass up as you're lowering the crossover, but you'll find that sweet spot between your main speaker and how it interacts with your room, and then the crossover point and how it interacts with your speakers. Placement's key. Spend some time with placement, spend some time tuning the crossover point, volume control, run your speakers full range. 20, 30 minutes of adjustments. You should have that thing dialed in.
Yeah. And I would assume you have people on your team who are experienced with some of those really, in-depth measurement softwares like REW and Dirac, or if you really want to deep dive into this and find exactly where and how the frequencies are interacting within your room to be able to smooth out nulls and peaks and use the parametric EQ, that's something that ListenUp will be able to help with. Is that fair to say?
Our tech team's outstanding. They're all trained. Most of those guys are like me. They've been in the business for years. So if you're fortunate enough to live in the area and have our guys do the setup, then you're guaranteed a top-notch finished product.
And Larry, I know you've done calibration in dozens of rooms, hotels, dealers, other people's homes. It doesn't end with your Odyssey sort of room correction. There are things you can do after the fact that can actually improve the quality of the subwoofer or actually reduce the damage that the calibration software did itself. So why don't you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I see a lot of questions coming up about where they should cross over their speakers. So I'll tell you right now, if you're using a conventional surround sound receiver, no speaker should be set to large. And that's a big mistake a lot of people make, whether you're running towers or bookshelves or whatever you're running. If you're running a conventional surround sound receiver, not doing separate preamps and all of that stuff, set your speakers to small and then find out where their kind of crossover point is. And most speakers will probably be 60 hertz or 80 hertz where you're going to set them, in particular a front stage. And then your smaller speakers around you will lower. But once you've kind of got the crossover point played, you're going to do exactly like what Scott just said, is you're going to play something and listen to it and kind of get the volume adjusted. Most of the time, I tend to put the subwoofer where you've got the channel level outputs on a receiver. That's either flat at 0 or maybe -1, -2 on the level output. And then I adjust the volume or the gain physically on the subwoofer or using the app to where I get it to where I really like it. And I think that's also something that comes into play with our app-based control. So this is the room. It's a mess. This is my game room / office / room where the kids come and play and all my collectibles and stuff. But this is also where I listen to every movie that we select for our demos. And I've got the 2000 Pro over here in the corner, and I can sit there and on a fly adjust it. But I also have presets that I save in the app. So if you're in a room that's multi-purpose and you've got the family in there and you want to be able to watch your movies late at night, or maybe you go from music to movies or TV watching, you can actually save presets based on your listening habit, which really can kind of open it up. So if you've got a 2-channel system where you've got a receiver that can do 2-channel and 5.1 without having to finagle a lot, you can save a preset for music where it activates the crossover in the subwoofer. Or you can save a preset for movies where it doesn't use that, but maybe the volume is quite a bit higher. So in my living room, we've got a movie preset, a TV watching preset, which is more subdued, and then the nighttime preset that shuts it off. And then in this room, I've got a prime speaker set up with the 2000 Pro, and I've got a music preset and a movie preset. And it's just something you can do, and you don't really find that on many other products out there. And then
incoming chat.
You can keep deep diving in there too if you're doing multiples and play with phase. So I saw somebody ask about getting the bass to where it doesn't sound like it's a foot or two behind them. Inside the app, you have the ability to change phase, your low frequency, polarity, parametric EQ, all this funky stuff that 99% of people don't even know what that means.
I think that's important to say. Some of these, like, you feel like, well, it's there, I must have to use it, but there's a lot we could say about them that's really technical, but I think what you just said is probably the most important point, is most of those phase and polarity you don't need to mess around with, but there are some instances, and maybe you can get into when you do, but keeping it relatively high.
Yeah, I won't geek out because I typically all I ever use in the app is crossover, the volume gain, and phase, and that's really about all. And then saving presets, but the volume you can adjust just on the fly. My one movie that you all know, if you follow us, that I love to play is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 2014.
Couldn't resist, could you?
But it's fun if you've got the app, and if my wife heads out, and I've got 3 boys, so if we watch a movie, we tend to crank up the subwoofer quite a bit more, just because we like that. And so I just bust out the app and I make the adjustment on the fly, which is awesome. But if you're running multiples or having an issue like somebody asked earlier about the bass sounds like it's a little too far away from you, you can play with the phase. And most subwoofers only have a 0 and 180-degree phase adjustment. And that doesn't help you if your subwoofer is off axis a little bit. So inside the app, essentially what you're doing with phase is kind of time correcting the bass reaching you. So sit there in the app and just kind of go. And you can go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 54 to 88, whatever in between. And what you will hear is the time it gets to you changes. So there's that you can play with, and then you can get into the receiver and make some additional adjustments too. But we don't typically recommend like LFE plus main because you're getting double bass and it's putting too much output on your speakers. So just run them small, the LFE output, and then play with the app.
So before we move on, Scott, I did want to give you the opportunity to either react to anything Larry said or give some sort of final tips that might help people when they're in their setup phase, whether it's with 2-channel or home theater. And I don't want this to be exclusive to SVS because I know you guys sell a wide range of subwoofers from different brands. So maybe there's some considerations there when setting up people should know about. But I did, before we move on, want to make sure you had one more opportunity to share any knowledge.
The one tip I could give you is specific to surround sound stuff, and it is setting your subwoofer output to LFE plus main. So surround sound receivers out of the box, the subwoofer output is only set up to output the 0.1 channel. So we'll sell a customer a sub, they'll take it home, they'll plug it in, they'll call me on the phone and go, man, this thing doesn't have any bass. I have bass on my test tone, but I have no bass when I'm playing music, have no bass when I'm watching movies. And oftentimes it's because the subwoofer output was set to only output the 0.1 channel. So you have to get in there, tell it to output LFE plus main. If, as Larry said, you set them up as small, that subwoofer receiver most likely will default to that. We though, given some of the products we sell, oftentimes don't set the surround speakers to small. So you have to do that. That's been something that for years I've answered that call on, and it's a quick fix. Best tip in the world.
Isn't it funny though? People are like, well, I have these massive tower speakers. I can't possibly set them to small. And you're like, it has nothing to do with like the physical size of your speakers. So I think that's one of the most misunderstood settings as far as all of AV goes, because they kind of with size when it really has nothing to do with that. All right. I think we went pretty deep into the calibration and tuning. I mean, again, I think there's a million questions out there, and we're going to get to those and save a good amount of time because there's some great questions that the team has asked. But we didn't want to miss the opportunity to plug some different ways you can trick out your subwoofer, because once you buy it and you install it, there's still some bells and whistles you can add, and SVS just so happens to have a few of those. So, Larry, I'm going to pop something up on screen here, and you can tell me what exactly we're looking at and why somebody might want these sweet feet on their subwoofer.
Cool. Well, it's somewhere on my desk, but that is the SoundPath subwoofer isolation system. So I'm sure you all have been in a home with a subwoofer. You might be part of this group where when you have your subwoofer going, it may rattle some objects in the home, knock some things down, or maybe just be a little bit overpowering in a space. Or if you're in a condo or an apartment and you want to be a better neighbor, the purpose of the SoundPath subwoofer isolation system is to decouple the subwoofer from the floor so that the bass isn't transferred quite as much out of the room and tends to stay in that space. And what it can also do is tighten up the actual bass in that room. But if you're in a second floor, you know, the bass is going to go straight through the floor. So this can help you there. If you've got a subwoofer corner loaded, the opposite corner is going to be impacted from it. So if you've got trinkets and stuff up there, you know, I've knocked down out. I still haven't fixed it, but up there next to that elevation speaker, there should be another album hanging there. And I knocked it down from the micro that's here under my desk. So there's a lot of those things where the isolation system can help you there. And you can put it under towers, you can put it under subwoofers, you can put it under components.
Turntables. Yeah, it's important to note that they're not exclusive for SVS. The way that they install, you can put them on, like you said, all those different components, but they also fit most other subwoofer brands as well. And again, the benefits of decoupling are acoustic in the sense that you can get cleaner, tighter bass. They can remove artifacts from the room that are rattling and shaking. And then also, we've seen people comment on how they can now play their system even louder without bothering their neighbors, because that sort of resonant frequency that they hear the wall shaking has just completely gone away. So I think those are important things for people who love bass. And, a lot of people ask them, well, why aren't they just standard for all subwoofers? I mean, if you have concrete floors in a floor basement, something like that, it's probably not going to have as much of an impact. So, there's no reason to add that cost. And they're about $50. So it's really not a massive investment, but it can make such a huge difference in terms of the overall soundstage and just the way that you're feeling the bass as opposed to sort of experiencing it from all the artifacts happening in the room around you.
Yeah, and they're great for so many applications. And we kind of mentioned earlier putting a subwoofer inside a cabinet. The micro you can totally throw inside a cabinet and really not have any issues with it whatsoever, because it's totally inert and won't shake the doors and stuff. But the micro may not be necessarily enough output for some rooms. But if you are going to put maybe say a 1000 Pro in a cabinet or a 2000 Pro in a piece of furniture, putting the isolation system on there, I know that they're big, but there are cabinets that'll fit in there. Putting the isolation system on there will reduce some of the vibrations on furniture in there too.
So, Scott, I'm going to throw this one to you. And if you don't know what you're looking at, this is our tri-band wireless audio adapter. And basically what this will allow you to do is, shocking, make your subwoofer wireless. Scott, what are the instances where maybe you'd want to have wireless connectivity with your subwoofer as opposed to a cable run?
Man, this is one of the best products ever. I can't tell how many times we walk into a room, builder did a pre-wire, they pre-wired to the back corner of the room, in front of the kitchen. It's not where you want the sub. I want the sub in the front right corner. There's no wires there. There's a glass door. There's some kind of obstacle in the way. You plug these things into the subwoofer output. There's a transmitter. You connect to the subwoofer output. There's a receiver you connect into the sub. They work great. It's the best thing ever happened. We sell them all the time.
And they come in two flavors. What you're looking at is our tri-band. This would be one that works really well in especially sort of congested wireless environments. If you have maybe an alarm system and different other wireless devices, a thermostat that are all competing for bandwidth, this would be a better option. Then we have a slightly more affordable option, which doesn't use the tri-band network but works phenomenally well. And both of them get you about 50 to 65 feet of wireless range, line of sight. And it both pass a full range signal, so you could actually use them with a pair of powered speakers as well. It's not just an LFE signal, so useful there if you wanted to have some powered surrounds or something like that as well. And then the last accessory, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this because we have some great questions, but it's your most traditional way of connecting a subwoofer. And Larry, I think what I do want to hear what you have to say about, and give me a second here, this wonderful product here. Give me a hot second here.
Oh man, you're really making that. You built that up. I have a feeling.
I know. Look at that. Look at that cable feel. That cloth outer jacket. I mean, what could be more beautiful than that?
I'm not sure anyone knows how to use one of those. So let's figure this out. But the conventional way to hook up a subwoofer is just a single RCA cable, and you go into the LFE if you've got a subwoofer and an LFE output. If you're coming from a preamp and you're doing left and right, you use the left and right inputs that are on the sub. And all of our subs are daisy chainable, so you can go in and out if you don't have the ability to run a wire, or you can go back and use the wireless accessory too. So I mean, most systems you are going to use an RCA, and it's just a simple connection. And getting a cable that's shielded from noise, from power cords and stuff like that will absolutely make a difference too. And all of ours are gold plated and have a nice kind of turbine style connection on there, so they fit on there really nice as well.
That's some good cable talk there. Love it. And this is actually part of the prize tonight with your 3000 micro for whoever wins that.
And I want to go back and hit on the wireless real quick. So we've got the two options, the SoundPath wireless adapter and then the tri-band. And the tri-band is awesome. I've got a very wired home with the family of 5, and the conventional wireless adapter is okay in one room. But the tri-band adapter, what makes it cool and kind of sets it apart from all the other ones that are out there is it uses your 2.4 gigahertz. It's not connecting to your home network, but it creates its own point, like you said, a receiver and a transmitter, but it will bounce around depending on the interference that your home systems might offer. So it uses 2.4 gigahertz, 5.2 gigahertz, and 5.8. And it's phenomenal for CD player, turntables, subwoofers, whatever you're trying to transmit wirelessly. So people that have had bad experiences in the past with wireless, it's gone. This thing just works. And you can do up to 6 of them. So if you're think outside the box, outside of just using it for subwoofers, if you're trying to get audio all over the house to like powered speakers and they're not a network connected speaker, that's a great solution. Or an outdoor TV trying to bring the audio in. It's such a cool product, and there's a lot of really awesome applications for it. So
there you go. So you can trick out your subwoofer with new feet, wireless connectivity, or you can go the traditional cable route. But are you guys ready for some Q&A? We're going to go rapid fire here. So you're going to put you on the spot. We got 2 quick ones first. Tom Cohen asked what kind of headphones these are, and this used to be a client I represent called Municio, and that's actually 18 karat gold plating. They're out of business now, probably because they use 18 karat gold on their headphones. But you can no longer find Municio headphones, but that's what they are. Brian Becker asks, Larry, what kind of T-shirt you wearing today?
Oh man, okay, so this is it's my Chewbacca and Han Solo kind of Star Wars Calvin and Hobbes riding the Millennium Falcon mashup.
Sorry, Scott, no questions about your shirt, but I got a good one here that I think people might like the answer to. Raj Thomas asks, do XLR balanced connections make a difference? And I assume he means with sound quality. Using XLRs versus RCA, I would assume is sort of the question.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly can. You know, that there's more to that. There's more to that than a simple yes or a no. But I think anytime there's an option to use XLR, it's usually a good practice to go ahead and do so. If it's a truly balanced design, it can help to eliminate some of the noise that can come into a cable. You know, SVS cables, they're all shielded. Any good cable is shielded, but you can take that a step further in a balanced cable design, and you get a little bit more gain as well.
Yeah, and not all subwoofers have the XLR inputs, but you know, if you find one, they're there for a reason. And like you said, I think their ability to reject interference is one of the big ones. And something I learned, well, I knew this a while ago, but one of the biggest causes of interference is crossing your power cable with your speaker cables. Yeah. No, right? Are you supposed to? No, you're supposed to cross them this way or not parallel, right? What's the tip there?
Keep them 12 inches away or more, and crossing them is good. But if you run them parallel, you're in trouble.
Bad news. So there you go. That's a quick little way to solve some distortion issues if you're having any. All right, Larry, Herman Holmes asks, will matching an SB2000 with an SB2000 Pro be a problem?
Not really. They're essentially the same size driver. Amplifiers are similar. You just have an easier time with the Pro because you've got the app, but you can get them very close. And we talk about not mixing ported and sealed. You know, if you're looking at maybe you've got an existing sealed subwoofer and you're looking to add a second, you want to keep them as close in design and size as amplifier and driver as possible. Then it's much easier to match. But if you get one that's overpowering another one, you're really not gaining anything from that.
Yeah, 2000 Pro, okay. 3000 micro, SB16 Ultra, probably not going to play as nicely together as
the
those
micro
ones
does go really cool behind a couch if you're looking for kind of like that local bass. So
yeah,
you can do that.
Try to keep them as close to possible. Again, not always recommended to mix brands. So, the best case scenario is to have the exact same subwoofer, but the further you veer away from having the exact same one, the less optimal it's going to be. So I think that's sort of the general rule of thumb. All right. Scott Brett C asks, if you only have one subwoofer, is it okay to place it in the center of your listening position?
Yeah. I mean, if that's the only place you can place it, then go for it. But as we've discussed, you want to try you either want to park it where you're going to sit and then crawl around on the room, or put it in the left side, put it in the center, put it in the right side, play the same track 3 times, and go with the one that sounds the best.
Oh, great advice. So, Larry, Eric asks, the only place he has available for his subwoofer is on top of a linen cabinet, which is about 6. I can't tell if that's 6 feet or 6 inches, but either way, any tips for dialing in a sub that's elevated off the ground?
That would be a really tiny linen cabinet at 6 inches.
Yes, you're right. Like a mouse.
You know, I've totally seen this where subwoofers up high, and you know, sometimes it's the only spot, but you know, there's not a right or wrong way to calibrate that. You're gonna have some tricks, and you're gonna probably be playing with. I think another one that gets forgotten about is playing with distance inside the subwoofer. If you add a few feet or take a few feet away, it can also change the timing of it getting to you. But I would tell you, if that's the only spot you previously had, take a look at the wireless adapter, because then that will probably open up places. Because if it's going on top of a linen cabinet, it's not a very large subwoofer, so you can probably put it somewhere else if you take advantage of a wireless adapter.
Scott, Stephen J asks, if you only have 2 subwoofers, can you stack them on top of each other, or is it better to separate them in the room?
In a stereo system?
Doesn't specify.
Doesn't specify. So, man, I tell you what, line array subs, that's the new cool thing. Take 2 SB, 2 micro 3000s for the left channel, 2 SB micro 3000s for the right channel, stack one on top of the other. You'll go preamp into one, preamp out of that one into the other. It's a cool effect when you have line array subs. So yeah, I'm all on that.
There you go. Stacking, not a problem. And it goes back to having multiple subwoofers. It's just more forgiving in general. You know, but I've heard from our lead sound expert that sometimes and generally opposite corners are ideal. If you can put them anywhere, put them in opposing corners or opposing sidewalls, and that will give you the sort of best accurate frequency response in all the listening areas. But again, not everyone has that luxury. So if you got to stack them, stack them. 2 is better than 1. All right. Larry, Derek T asks, he's considering a pair of SB2000s or SB3000s in an 18 by 30 home theater. Curious if that will do the trick with 7-foot ceilings. And I think this gets more to your advice on choosing subwoofers based on room size. So maybe go there and give Derek some insight.
That's a long room. 2000s or 3000s would totally work in that space if they're placed in the right spot. So a room that's 18 by 30, I'm going to assume it's also probably being used as multi-purpose, like either it's a basement or it's an open concept room. So you're going to want to keep that bass in the room. So if you're comparing maybe 2000s and 3000s, PB 2000 Pro might be the way to go in a room that's that large. But if you can't do the ported models, both of those would take on that space really well, regardless of 2000 or 3000, if you get them placed in the proper spot. And there's not a big difference in physical size between the 2000 Pro and the 3000 series, but the 3000 would take on that room a little bit better. Just because
and there was another question about, do we have a recommendation for how many subwoofers you should have per square foot? And there isn't really one. It kind of comes down to your preferences and whether you're going to have 2 versus 1. So it's hard to say definitively, well, you got, this size room, this is the exact subwoofer for you. Talk to the folks at ListenUp, talk to our team. We'll get, some information out of you that'll help make that decision that's best for you, not necessarily based purely on the size of the room. All right, here's a softball, Scott. I hope you get it right. Chris R asks, can you seal the ports on an SVS subwoofer to provide better response from music?
You absolutely can. Yeah, there that's again part of really engaging with your system and not taking it as it comes out of the box. Spend some time working with it. There's port plugs that you can plug in there and basically turn that ported plug into or that ported sub into a sealed sub. You can take like a PB16 that has 3 ports and maybe plug one of the ports to see how that sounds. And does that give you a better response?
So follow up to that one, Larry. Simon H asks, can you elaborate on how SVS ported subwoofers give you the best of both worlds? What can you actually control in the app that unleashes that ability? And I think Scott spoke to it, but what else can you add?
So I will say it has to be one of our subs with the app. You can't take like our old 2000 series or old 1000 series and just plug up the ports, because then you're creating some issues there. But within the app, what you do, so inside the box with each of the subs, and if maybe you've got one and you don't have the port plugs for whatever reason, you can contact us and we'll get them for you. But in the box, when you open the subwoofer, there's these gray foam plugs that are inserted in the ports during shipping. That's not shipping foam. That is actually the port plugs. And what you do is inside the app, you'll go into one of the settings, and there is a mode where you can choose the subwoofer mode. You can choose it as what's called standard, where the ports are open, and that operates as a ported subwoofer. Extended, where you would plug one of the 2 or 3 ports depending on the model. And what that does is that kind of helps take care of nulls in the room, or maybe it's really boomy on a particular note. You can adjust that. And then there's fully sealed, where you will plug up either both of the ports or the 3 ports depending on the model. And what you're creating there is you choose sealed in the app, and it totally changes the way the DSP and the amp and everything works inside the subwoofer. Because if you just go and plug up a subwoofer, it's not meant for that. You can burn up the voice coil, you can destroy the amplifier, you can destroy the driver. So it's actually some technology inside the app that's physically changing the operation of the subwoofer as it's going. So you plug that up, and now what you have is a larger cabinet sealed subwoofer, which is, if you're looking at the best of both worlds, you're going to get that big over-the-top theatrical experience like we were talking about for your movies, and you'll have a larger cabinet sealed sub for your music.
And it's worth noting, there are we've heard horror stories of people whose kids have stuffed animals and socks and various things within the ports, and they're like, why doesn't it sound right? And then finally they stick their hand in there and they're like, oh, it's because Mr. Binky was in there or something. So it's something to be aware of.
I worked at Best Buy. It was one of my first, when I jumped in electronics, and this customer came in with an old JBL 8-inch sub, and it was rattling and he couldn't figure it out. And I just stuck my hand in the port. I was like, I swear to minute, I was pulling out Army men. And
they're such a perfect, for kids, they're just irresistible. That's why we sell the grills, and we include them standard. So if you got kids or dogs or whatever, put the grill on, give yourself a little extra, protection in there. So I think we can hit 2 more questions. We're at the hour. We'll do the giveaway, but these are 2 quick ones that I think we can hit on here. Scott Anthony asks, how do you know if you need a bass trap or other room treatment?
That's not an easy thing to do. Room treatment on its own is kind of its own science. A bass trap in the corner can keep that sub from kind of loading up in the corner. Those are oftentimes a good idea. But short of having acoustical treatment on hand and being able to experiment with different options, or in our case, we work with, our acoustical, some of the products that we offer for acoustical treatment, they'll model your room. So we can take details of your room, send it to these guys. They'll run their supercomputer on it and come back to us and go, these are the things you should consider to treat your room.
Yeah, it's hard to do unless you're an expert in sort of this field, and they can get kind of expensive. If you get the real ones, we've seen people tape, foam mattresses to the wall with a little, egg carton thing, and that's not, going to hurt you. But I think the important point is that your room is part of your system. How the sound interacts with the walls and the furniture, that's part of your system. So, it's not going to hurt to add room treatments if you do it right. But, there's a diminishing return there based on the amount of effort and the budget you're willing to spend. So you might be better off investing in better gear as opposed to that. But this is part of the journey that we all love. So talk to somebody like Scott or, some of the folks at SVS, and they'll get you on the best path possible.
And sometimes it's as simple as a rug or thicker curtains. Sure. So there's a lot of that comes into play. I don't use bass traps because I don't have a special room or whatever, but got a really thick curtain over here because there's a massive window. So it's a really thick curtain to kind of help for that too.
Windows are not good. So
yes,
we've got to cover the windows.
All right. 2 more quick ones. What receiver specs should you look for when running a subwoofer? You really don't have to. It is internally amplified, so it doesn't really matter. It's just even if you only have a single output, you can get a splitter to run duals off a receiver with a single output. So there's really not a lot you have to look at as far as subwoofers go when you're choosing a receiver. Although Larry will tell you there's different sound, and the signal strength is different depending on which model, but we're not going to go down that road today. But we have experienced it firsthand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Last question before our giveaway. Mark asks, and this one's for you, Larry. If a person has a ported main speakers, is it better to go with a ported subwoofer, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. That's probably the easiest way to put it. It's more of just finding the subwoofer that's going to blend with those speakers. And so jump on our website and check out the matching tool. It's actually really fun to see what speakers you've got. It'll give a recommendation based on those speakers. So when you start moving into large towers, most of them are ported, and it really doesn't matter if you do a sealed or a ported sub, because a large tower is not going out there going to crush your room with 20 hertz bass. I mean, they're going to bottom out, typically about 40 hertz, maybe 30, and you're really only going to get that when you're typically cranking it pretty loud. So whether your speakers are ported or sealed, it really doesn't matter when it comes to the sub. All
right. Well, before we do our giveaway for the evening, which is this beautiful 3000 micro subwoofer we're seeing here, I first wanted to say thank you to Scott Janal, legend in the Colorado audiophile community, like 30, 40 years in the industry. The dude knows more than anyone else about audio. So he's a phenomenal resource, as is the entire team at ListenUp. So Scott, Thank you for dropping some knowledge with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks to you, thanks to Larry, and thanks to everyone that took the time to spend the last hour with us. It was a lot of fun.
I totally agree. Some great questions there, great energy and excitement. And Larry, we are going to come back for one of our SVS audiophile happy hours next Thursday at the same time, 6 p.m. Eastern. So you'll be able to see our faces again and get some more knowledge. We'll have a cool guest, so join us for that. More giveaways, of course. So that's Thursday the 31st at 6 p.m. Eastern time. But I think a lot of people are sitting around waiting to see who the giveaway winner is of the 3000 micro subwoofer and SoundPath RCA audio interconnect cable. And that winner is Sarah Prowett Haslam. Congratulations,
awesome.
Sarah.
Congratulations.
Prowett Haslam. We will reach out, get your shipping information, and get one of these out to you. So again, thank you to my partners in crime here, Scott and Larry. We wish everyone a fantastic evening. Appreciate you joining in, and we'll definitely catch up and do this down the road.
Thanks, everybody.